excited to be here. This is one of my favorite events of the year. I guess to get started, I will give you guys something to do in the chat box. Just go ahead and say good morning and share what part of Virginia you're from in the chat box. And you can also feel free to share what you are hoping to get more information about today. Our theme is determine your future. And this is a great way to work on your future by spending the day with us for the summit today and learning things to help you with advocating for people with disabilities. So in the chat, just type in again your name, where you're from, and something that you hope to learn or get more information about today. So as Hera stated, I am Dr. Zipporah Levi-Shackleford. A lot just call me Dr. Z. I am in Richmond, Virginia, and I'm the founder of Creative Approach Development Center. I also am the chair for the Disability Law Center of Virginia's Mental Health Advisory Council and a board member. I am a Black woman with Black and blue locks. I have on pink glasses, and I'm wearing a Black shirt with pink rosebuds on it. And my background is light blue with different framed degrees and pictures. So again, everyone, good morning. I hope you're doing well. I hope everybody has gotten themselves comfortable for today because we have a long day ahead of us with lots of great information. Feel free to get yourself a drink and a snack. And again, make yourself comfortable. I also recommend grabbing a notebook because again, lots of great information to share. And on behalf of the Disability Law Center of Virginia's Board of Directors and the Mental Health Advisory Council, I want to personally thank you for joining us for this empowering and informative event. Again, we have the day planned and packed with lots of engaging sessions that will help you learn more about issues and resources to assist those with disabilities. As I mentioned, the theme for this summit is determine your future. And to help us keep that in mind and to focus on the purpose of this summit, I want to get things started by reading a couple of quotes. So the first quote is from Nelson Mandela. To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. Mahatma Gandhi stated, the true measure of a society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And then the last quote I'll share is from John F. Kennedy. The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Now I chose these three quotes because they all focus on human rights. And I'm going to pause for a second for us to think about what human rights are and kind of think about why I focused on that topic. So the first part of thinking about this would be to consider the definition of human rights. And according to the United Nations, human rights is defined as rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, religion, or any other status. The document called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, adopted this definition and the human rights list back in 1948. So we know that human rights and the value and importance of human rights is something that has been in discussion for centuries. Under the UDHR, that declaration, we find descriptions of what human rights are. They list the right to live, with the belief that everyone has the right to live. No one has the right to take your life or treat you in ways that could endanger your life. It lists the right to freedom and safety. You have the right to be free and feel safe. No one should enslave you or hurt you. The right to equality. All people are equal and should be treated equally, no matter their race, religion, gender, or background. The right to fair treatment. You should be treated fairly by the law. If you're accused of something, you have the right to a fair trial and to defend yourself. The right to privacy. You have the right to keep your personal life and information private. No one should interfere with your home, family, or communications without your permission. The right to freedom of thought and expression. You can think and believe what you want, practice your religion, and express your ideas freely. Number 7 is the right to education. Everyone has the right to an education that helps them develop their skills and abilities. The right to work. You have the right to work in a job that you choose, the right to be paid fairly, and to work in safe conditions. The right to rest and leisure. You have the right to rest and take breaks from work, including having holidays. Number 10 is the right to health and well-being. You have the right to live in good health with access to food, clean water, shelter, and medical care. Right to freedom from discrimination. No one should treat you unfairly because of your race, gender, age, disability, or other differences. Number 12 is the right to participate in government. You have the right to take part in the government of your country, either by voting or running for office. The right to freedom of movement. You can travel within your country and leave or return to your country whenever you want. Right to own property. You have the right to own your own things, such as a car or a house, and no one should take them away without a good reason. And then number 15 is listed as the right to join groups. You have the right to form or join groups and associations as long as they're peaceful. So again, these rights are something that are highly valued and have been for centuries by all. But when we look at our history, we see that throughout it, certain groups did not have access to these human rights. We know that Indigenous people, Black Americans, and women had to fight in order to obtain access to these same rights that were provided to others. But another group that is often overlooked that had to fight really hard in order to have access to these very same human rights are people with disabilities. People with disabilities had to organize and advocate for many years in order to get access to these basic human rights. When we look at the history of people with disabilities, we hear and we see the very horrific stories about how they were treated. We learned that for centuries, they were not allowed to attend schools. They were kept home or put in institutions where they could not get access to an education like their peers. They were not allowed to work, or if they did work, it wasn't in a safe setting, and they did not get competitive or meaningful wages to compensate for their efforts and their work. We know that they were victims and forced into experimentation, including sterilization. Again, they were forced into institutions. There's high rates of abuse and neglect, and just looked at as a burden to society that needed to be hidden away. These horror stories were even harsher for people with disabilities who also belong to other groups of underrepresented and mistreated people, like people of color, women, or those who identify in the LGBTQ group. So when we look at this and we look at what happens when your human rights are denied, we realize that you lose control of your choices. And this means that you don't have any control of your life path. You're forced to engage in activities and live in conditions that don't match up with your personal goals and preferences. And for hundreds of years, people with disabilities were forced to live in this way. They did not have the opportunity to express their personal preferences. They didn't have the opportunity to explore, to understand that they had choices, and that they could create a future based more on what their dreams were. So this brings me back to our theme for this year's summit, Determine Your Future. To a lot of people, this may seem like a simple phrase, but again, when you think about the history of disability rights, you can really see the connection and realize how powerful the phrase determine your future is. The freedom to choose how you live your life and have access to resources and accommodations to do so is what inspired countless disability rights leaders and advocates such as Helen Keller, Ed Roberts, Brad Lomax, Judy Heumann, Lois Carter, and many others to organize and demand to be treated equally. Again, this wasn't an easy activity, and it wasn't a quick activity. When we look at the disability rights movement, we see that efforts started as early as the mid-1800s. A lot of the progress happened in the 1900s, which sounds crazy. It sounds so long ago for me to be a 1980s baby to say the 1900s. I'm in the history books now. But one of the first documented examples is in the 1930s, where a group of people with physical disabilities organized what they called the League of the Physically Handicapped. And they focused and advocated for the right for people with disabilities to be employed during the Great Depression. In 1940, a group of psychiatric patients came together and they formed a group called We Are Not Alone. And the focus of this group was to support patients in the transition from the hospital setting into the community setting. So we see back in 1940, the importance of people having access to their community and being a part of their community was valued over being in a hospital or institution setting. In the 1940s, President Truman formed the National Institute of Mental Health, and that was in 1948. In 1950, several local groups came together and formed an organization that dedicated time and efforts to finding alternative forms of care and education for their children. Because up to this point, children with disabilities did not have access to school, so they were kept at home and did not get a proper education. Between the years of 1960 and 1963, President Kennedy organized several planning committees that focused on researching disabilities and finding proper treatment for helping people with disabilities begin to close some of the achievement gaps and live lives that they wanted to live based on their choice. And then in 1973, we received the Rehabilitation Act, which specifically addresses disability discrimination. In the Rehabilitation Act, we have Section 501, which looked at the support for people with disabilities in the federal workplace and in organizations that receive federal tax dollars. So it prevented discrimination for people with disabilities in these settings. Section 503 supported employment and education for members of traditionally disadvantaged minority groups, which also included people with disabilities. And then Section 504 focused on prohibiting discrimination against individuals with disabilities in the workplace and in their programs and activities. Section 508 guarantees equal or comparable access to technological information and data for people with disabilities. Also in 1975, we received the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which guaranteed that children with disabilities had the right to public school education. This allowed thousands of children with disabilities to be able to finally attend public school settings with their siblings and peers. And this continues to this day. Now, in 1975, because of the time period between the 60s and 70s, we had this heavy focus on access to rights and better treatment for people with disabilities. We also at this time had the civil rights movement, where there was a lot of focus on the same access to rights and better treatment to people of color and people who were members of the LGBT communities. Because of this, in 1975, a reporter decided to do a documentation on an institution that was in New York State. The institution was known as the Willowbrook Institution. The reporter got footage to show the horrific treatment of these people in the institution. It showed that these individuals were sleeping on the floor. Many of them did not have clothes. They were hungry. It showed a nurse using the same spoon to just go down the line and administer medication to multiple patients without cleaning the spoon or changing the spoon. It was just really upsetting and deplorable conditions. And this really showed the urgency for the government and citizens to really start paying attention to the treatment of people with disabilities. This documentary led to the federal government getting involved and deciding that it was time to do something. Many people were thinking that these institutions were, just good settings for people with disabilities. A lot of parents were advised by medical professionals when they found out that their child had a disability to go ahead and sign them over to these institution settings with the belief that these were places that were best for their children with disabilities. But once this information about this institution came out, we saw that the buildings and stuff were not being maintained. It was a huge shortage of staff. They were overcrowded, and it just was not a good setting. So the government got involved, and one of the movements that they made was they started a federal requirement that each state has to have an agency that they call the Protection and Advocacy Agency, or a P&A. And the purpose of the Protection and Advocacy Agency was to monitor the conditions of people with disabilities, and not just in the institutions, but in all settings. So P&As actually have the ability to go into any setting where people with disabilities are, in order to make sure that their rights are not being violated. So this includes schools, this includes hospitals, this includes institutions, this even includes prisons and jails. Now, as I stated, this happened in 1975, and currently there are 57 P&As in each state and territory in the United States. Now, if you look it up, you'll notice that each state has a different name for their P&A. Originally in Virginia, our P&A was called the Virginia Office of Protection and Advocacy, or VOPA. But then on October 1st, 2013, so we just missed the anniversary, but on October 1st, 2013, our P&A transitioned from a state-funded organization to a private nonprofit organization, which is known as now the Disability Law Center of Virginia, or the dLCV. So that's a little history about how dLCV got started. Now, me being a person with a disability and being a parent and a sibling to individuals with disabilities, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm also a behavior therapist, and I provide my services to individuals that are recipients of the Medicaid DD waiver. I unfortunately know firsthand that people with disabilities continue to have their rights violated and ignored. and including, not just nationally, but in Virginia. They're often denied the ability to choose how they want to live their lives. Now, as Virginia's P&A, the Disability Law Center of Virginia works hard every day to monitor conditions of the over 1.6 million people with disabilities across Virginia every day. They work to make sure that people with disabilities are free from harm, that children and youth with disabilities receive an appropriate education, that people with disabilities have appropriate access to government services, that people with disabilities live in the most appropriate integrated environment, that people with disabilities receive appropriate vocational rehabilitation services and employment supports, that people with disabilities have reasonable accommodations and effective communications in healthcare, and that people with disabilities become better self-advocates through education and training. Those are the 7 objectives that dLCV focuses on annually. And these 7 objectives allow Virginians with disabilities the opportunity to make choices about their lives and develop future plans based on their personal choices, interests, and preferences, which is an activity dLCV firmly believes in. While dLCV assists thousands of individuals each year, its staff, the board of directors, and committee members know that the mission is much bigger than we can address alone. So now I'm gonna do a little shameless plug. This is why dLCV hosts events like today's summit, because this is a way to help spread awareness of the issues for people with disabilities and to educate all of the attendees about the resources and tools that we can all use to advocate for a better quality of life for those with disabilities. By you guys joining us today, you're helping us expand our reach. And that is something that I personally thank you for. And I know that the board and staff and committee members do as well. But I would also like to share some other ways that you all can help us with this huge mission. And one of those ways is by volunteering. We have a variety of activities that you can help volunteer. And they range in, I guess, like the amount of activity and work that you have to do. But an example would be, we're very focused on making sure that people with disabilities have access to accessible polling stations and they vote, they exercise their right to vote. We're looking for volunteers to help check out different polling stations across the state to make sure that they're accessible and that people with disabilities can easily cast their ballots. Another example is helping to put together packets for mailing, or helping us set up for events like this one, just to name a few. We have lots of committees, and we're always in need of new members to help us with committees. We're looking for fresh ideas all the time. We would love some new members on the Mental Health Advisory Council, which is one of the councils that I am very happy and honored to chair. And we also look for more members for the board of directors. And then lastly, please consider making a donation of any size, as every dollar can help us continue to provide the guidance and support to those with disabilities. So as you attend the different sessions today, I want you to think about the ways that the information that you obtain today can help you incorporate disability advocacy into your future. As you're determining your future, I hope that you include the efforts to continue to support and advocate for those with disabilities. So again, I thank you all for attending today's summit. We have really, really exciting and great information sessions. And I have my schedule full, so I hope to see some of you in the different sessions that I plan to attend. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.